Thank you very much. I don't deserve this applause. I'm only as good as the people around me, including yourself. And since we are here in Poland, a lot of what is happening here goes back to the work of Dr. Niedzwiecki, who has been fighting this battle with me for the last 2 decades. And I told her many times that one day her name will be ranking in this country at the side of Maria Sverdlovska and other scientists for saving millions of lives. We need to reflect about the very fundamental forces that brought us here today. Not 10 years ago, not 100 years ago, but thousands of generations ago. The forces of life created the environment where we live. This is the only planet in the universe where there's an atmosphere for life, as far as we know. The forces of life created life on this planet. The forces of life created human beings, us on this planet. The forces of life created the plants we eat and we need for our bodies functioning. The forces of life created the ingredients of these plants that are necessary for our life and our well-being and our health. Namely, vitamins, minerals, and other bioactive plant ingredients, which we call phytobiologicals. It was inevitable that this happened. The forces of evil, as I call them, they started to fight the forces of life. They said, we want to control this. We want to control knowledge. We own it. We want to determine that. That was the birth hour of the chemical cartel. Why is the chemical cartel so important? Well, maybe you never thought about it, but chemical industry is the industry that determines essentially everything. The colors that you see, the paints of your house, the materials you sit on, the car you drive, the seats in there, the drugs you take, the socks you wear. Go through the next 24 hours, more than 50% of the things you touch come from the chemical industry. No other industry is as pervasive as that in our life. And here is its origin. 1863, Bayer was incorporated. The same year, Höchst was incorporated. Höchst today is incorporated in Sanofi, French company. 2 years later only, BASF was incorporated. So that was the time of complete of a launch of knowledge in this area, about 150 years ago. What did they do? Well, the first thing they did is they copied nature. Here's the picture of a willow tree. You see them along every river. Well, they found that the willow tree contains in its bark a substance that kills pain. So they reproduced that substance, added a little molecule, and had acetylic salicylic acid, better known as aspirin. And they patented that. Same thing with the coca blend. They isolated the substance that takes away the pain, and they got procaine. And they reproduced it. They were able to identify it and reproduce it synthetically. And they did so not just with 2 substances, but with hundreds, in fact thousands of substances. We call it the Lego principle. That's what they did. Putting little molecules together like in a Lego system. But copying nature was only the first step. What they were really aiming at was to possess nature, to own this knowledge exclusively, and to make money from it. So they were up to becoming the new gods. In fact, they called themselves the Council of Gods. These companies were not operating behind closed doors. They were politically well connected, so well that in parallel to the growth of the industry, its influence on German policy and policy makers increased. So in 1914, they commissioned German Emperor Wilhelm II to go to war. But 4 years before the war started, they already gave the military the decisive technology to win this war. How? The same chemical industry managed to create bombs from air. 70% of air is nitrogen. They were able to liquefy nitrogen and putting it into ammonium, which is the basis of gunpowder. So there was unlimited gunpowder made from air. A dream for everyone who wanted to start a war. So not only did they have the goal for global conquest, they also provided the technology to win it. Fritz Haber, BASF. So 4 years before the Cartel launched its first attempt at world conquest in coalition with the German Emperor and the Wehrmacht, they knew how to produce bombs from air. The patent owners of mustard gas and other chemical warfare agents are who? Bayer. They produced the gas needed to win the war when the bombs were not sufficient. The war that aimed at expanding their markets. So World War I, in summary, was the first attempt of the chemical cartel at the military conquest of the world. 8 years after that war failed to reach its goals, they did not give up. To the contrary, they formally united into one company. Bayer, BASF and Hoechst became one company called IG Farben. From the early 1930s, IG Farben invests in the Nazis as part of their second strategy of world conquest. One of the central elements of their strategy was the so-called Grand Plan East, in German Generalplan Ost. It was very simple. Germany was the cartel's economic and political headquarters. And Eastern Europe and the rest of the world was a reservoir of dependent consumers and slave laborers. That was the plan. We are told the medical experiments conducted on thousands of innocent inmates of the concentration camps were the criminal acts of deviated SS doctors. The Nuremberg War Crime Tribunal records tell us something completely different. This picture is one of the pictures from that trial. It shows ampules injected into concentration camp inmates. And the preparation says what? Bayer. IG Farben Industries. The preparation didn't have a name. It was a code name because it was what? Patented. So these companies, they used the concentration camps as huge human laboratories to test their patented chemicals. In many cases with deadly results. We can summarize that chapter of history, especially of Polish history, as follows. World War II was the second attempt of the chemical drug cartel at the military conquest of the world to create a one single planet-wide market. They've done it before, ignored the interests of millions of people, sacrificed their lives, and they're doing it again. Well, look what's happening in Greece. Look what's happening in Spain, in Portugal. Look what's happening in other countries that have not made the news yet. It's just the beginning. So here is the master plan, the cartel's strategy to force Greece, Ireland, Spain, and the rest of Europe into bankruptcy. Well, why would they do that? Well, first of all, let's look at how they do it. They promote diseases behind the mask of providing health care. They do exactly the opposite from what their goal is. How can you cure cancer with chemotherapy when half of the chemotherapy substances are known to cause new cancer? And if you deceive entire nations with respect to the healthcare system, you are draining them economically. You're killing the people, but you also drain them economically. Entire nations. Because you force them to pay billions for imports of patented drugs. And that money, that's what causes the bankruptcy of entire nations. Not because the people in Greece, Ireland, or for that matter other European countries are lazy. It's the systematic drainage of essential funds. So now we come to the real purpose of this plan. The real purpose is the political takeover of entire continents. So by maintaining this crisis, by constantly draining this money, they actually cause the crisis. So when the crisis comes, Mr. Sarkozy can stand up there and can say, we need a transnational government for all Europe. And then, in order to hide that scheme, the political stakeholders of the cartel, namely Sarkozy and Merkel, embark on what I call psychological warfare against the people of Europe. Deception. They call it exactly the opposite. Defamation of people like us, of the pioneers, who say this is what's happening. And distraction, like wars in Libya and other areas. The purpose of all of that, confusion. You should not know what's left and right. It's such a crazy world. Let's just hand over all responsibility to those guys up there. That's what they want. So, the main goals of the movement of life are health for all, ending the dependency from patented drugs, eradicating diseases; food for all, ending the GMO madness, fighting world hunger; energy for all,
ending dependency from oil, and initiating a global acceptance of renewable energy. And this change doesn't come violently. It comes through education, like this tonight. And we all, you, are the teachers. Thank you for coming.